Mhm.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for doing this,
Yeah, of course.
and congrats on the nomination,
Thank
and welcome. I mean, I'm sure it's got to be interesting when you already have one. To be like, oh yeah, I've done this already, but it's still cool. But does it run through your head at all? You're like, oh, there's only a certain amount of people in the world who have been able to be like, oh no, I've done that already.
Yeah, I guess so. But it feels different this time, I guess.
Sure.
Because it's a movie, it's bigger,
Yeah.
there's a lot more, people behind it, a lot more writing on it. Yeah, it feels different.
Well, I imagine as much as anything, it's also just the feeling of like, okay, good, the stories that I care about, other people care about, which is more important, differently important. There are people, behind the scenes like, no, no, the Oscar is the important one. What are you talking about? But for you, for someone who, so thoroughly is embedded in the creative side of the entire company, let alone just the things you make, I imagine that's important to be able to go, okay, so when I have an idea and it feels very personal to me, it can still feel personal to other people, feel universal even.
Yeah. I mean, for me too, like it mainly just hopefully shows big studios that like if you invest in um diverse storytellers and give them a chance, that they can produce commercially and critically successful films, and that a story as specific as our film could resonate with audiences around the world.
Oh yeah, I think the weird miscalculation that always gets made is, oh, if it's too specific and too culturally specific or too personal, it excludes people. But at the same time, I feel like family dynamics, no matter what the cultural specificity is, kind of are universal in that way. You recognize, oh, my parents are like that, or there's a lot more of that than the like, oh, I can't connect to this at all. If anything, I think when everything's very homogenized and generic, everyone sort of goes, that's fine, but also they don't seem like real people, or this doesn't seem like a story I cop to. So it's weirdly counterintuitive when you get pushback against like, well, I want to tell a story about people I recognize.
Mhm. Yeah. I also feel like, like so many emotions that we go through are universal,
Yeah.
like jealousy, fear of failure, fear of disappointing your mom, fear of not being accepted. Um, and and I think like cultural specificity like really like makes these like it helps like yeah just add a uniqueness and like an entertainment value, I think,
Okay.
to a lot of these like stories that are exploring a lot more familiar emotions and ideas. And yeah, and I think audiences have an appetite for that. Like they can smell when something feels like unspecific or generic because it's not memorable. And I think like when you lean into specificity, when you lean into like a specific like a culture, then I think it helps your film stand out and it helps it like resonate, I think, because yeah, like it might be unfamiliar to a lot of people, but that's what makes them lean in because they're like, oh, I'm looking at something I've never seen before. That's really cool.
Oh yeah, it makes the world bigger for people who don't necessarily have the world's biggest world, but at the
Mhm.
same time, because you recognize so much of yourself in someone who doesn't look like you,
Mhm.
it makes the world smaller in the right way because you go, oh well, this isn't that different. That it's the
Yeah.
same way that you'll see with live action when a movie with subtitles kind of breaks through.
Mhm.
There's this idea of like, oh, I want to watch more of these, and you're like, yes, you should. Like movies are good no matter what language they're in. You
Yeah.
it's sort of whatever hooks someone in is what hooks them in, and it doesn't usually matter that it has to look like them or it has to be exactly their existence. Most people go to the movies for escapism, for fantasy, for tell me something I haven't seen before. So especially with Turning Red, like, well, here's a story about puberty. Like you probably haven't seen that. Also, you
Girl
also
puberty.
probably yeah. Well, that even narrows it down more to what
Yeah,
you've
even
seen on
more
screen. And also,
mysterious.
yeah, and then even of the ones you've seen, the girl never turned into a red panda. So we've got something very specific,
Mhm.
but we're talking about something very universal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean that's why I watch movies. Like I
Yeah.
want to escape. I want to be immersed in a world I've never seen before. And I think a lot, like I was surprised actually that a lot of people in this world don't know the secret world of a tween girl. And
Yeah.
it was a very exciting challenge to be able to introduce them to this world.
I never really understood why people don't pay attention. Like if you're a girl, you're deeply immersed in this world already. You're going to go through it. And if you're a boy, many of us are very interested in girls. So like
Yeah,
being aware of what they're going through was beneficial. Um,
yeah. I
and
mean,
then
I think it's funny. Like, I feel like our movie is like a good handbook for dudes to
yeah.
like better understand the girls and the women
Oh yeah, no,
and
it
their
was
moms in their lives.
I remember watching it little while before I came out. I was living with my ex at the time, and I was like literally watching it on screen in bed. And she was like, "Yep, that's right." Like just kind of like puttering in and out, doing, but also be like, "Yep, that's exactly what that was like." I'm like, all right, cool. You're from Wisconsin. This is a very different story. Like we're hitting it. All right. It's
Mhm.
there's something about when you can tell that a movie, especially animation, has a point of view
Mhm.
because there is not so much with Pixar, but there is sort of that urge to like, what if they're just like talking dogs that go on an adventure? And you're
Mhm.
like, well, yeah, people will like that. It'll make $1 billion. But it doesn't feed you in the same way that like, oh, I watched a story, like a
Mhm.
real, honest to goodness story that just happens to be animated because a red panda would be expensive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's why I love working here at Pixar because there's so much emphasis on telling great stories, and having characters that audiences resonate with and laugh with and cry with. And they don't really see animation as a restrictive, like, medium to only tell stories aimed for certain, age groups. That they really see animation as this tool, as this amazing visual tool that can tell all kinds of, like, and explore all kinds of complicated and dark themes, and kind of make it a digestible,
Right.
understandable kind of, yeah, thing that you can kind of enjoy and consume. And for me too, like for me, I kind of just wanted to make this film for my 13-year-old self, for that girl that was like confused and terrified, and like locked herself in her bathroom being like, why am I bleeding? Am I dying? What's
It's not
going
good.
on?
Yeah.
This is not good.
Yeah.
And yeah, and just like poke fun and like normalize
Yeah.
like the ups and downs of puberty,
That's the thing with, I think, for any filmmaker, if you don't feel like it's something that you want to be telling, why are you doing it? Like there's other reasons to make a movie that are perfectly valid. But like if you're spending, years of your life, especially with animation, like this is a
Yes.
process. You have to care about this. And that's what I think makes Pixar so special is like you can be like, I want to tell this very specific story. All right, let's develop it. Or if we're telling this other story that maybe doesn't come from as personal a place, but we have this team that's going to sit here and figure out, well, what does this actually mean before we do it? And we'll spend the time and we'll have all these different voices, and that's what I think makes what you're doing right now also so exciting is that there is this sort of like batting back of ideas that seems to be going on to be like, well, what can we do to make every Pixar movie distinctive, but also very much feel like it's coming from the same workshop in a way. So
Yeah.
kind of like we're doing things on a specific level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I what I love about our films is that like you can tell that the director has put themselves
Yeah.
into their movies. Like every movie feels like it was just like ripped from the director's life in some way. With like Finding Nemo and Monsters Inc. about Andrew and Pete dealing with fatherhood for the
Yeah.
first time. Inside Out about Pete like wondering like how do I deal with my teen daughter? And I think that's where, yeah, like that's where story gold comes from. It's like it has to come from a not a per like not a like a one-to-one
Yeah.
personal like experience, but I think like an emotion, like a very strong emotion that you felt at some point that has like fundamentally changed you or like moved you in some way. And I think like the big challenge for like at the beginning of all of our movies, especially for our movie too, was like how do we make audiences care about something that they
Yeah.
didn't normally care about? Like how like audiences didn't care about fish or toys. And I'm sure a lot of audience members like didn't care about like the inner workings of an Asian tween girl. But that's the fun challenge. Is like we like are gonna try our hardest to make you care about stuff that you never would have even thought about.
Yeah,
And I think that's really cool. It like really promotes empathy
oh
in
yeah, the elevator pitch on every Pixar movie is always very, very simple. And you're like, okay, I don't know. Okay, an old man and there's balloons. All right, whatever. Tell us more. And then you watch, oh, okay.
yes.
That is, I think, what makes it so special that you can that the time and the care is spent between multiple people. Like it does feel very writer and director forward as an animation house, but also the fact that there's so many voices kind of working together on it that you can go, like, all right, well, I want to have these three amazingly sad things happen in the third Toy Story movie. But how
Oh
can we
man.
make it that like it's going to work for adults? Children won't be left out. They'll understand something serious is happening, but they'll still laugh at the jokes. Like there's this very specific through line that every Pixar movie has had, but that some especially, I mean, Turning Red does this really well. Also, is just that oh, we're very serious about what we're talking about, but we're doing it in a very fun way because we want you to take in the message even if you're not in the mood for a message.
Yeah, and I think it all comes from the character. It's all about like taking the time to really develop and craft these characters and make them feel like they're living, breathing people, even though they're like not human.
or
Um,
or or a bit of food.
or a bit of food.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like yeah, I think it's just like how do we make audiences care?
Yeah.
And like that is the main goal at the end of the day. And I think like they care when they, are presented with this character who really, really wants something, who they like fall in love with, like through their personality, and you see them like really wanting something and trying their hardest to get it, but they're not able to get it. That's how you make them care. And I think that's what we were trying to do with May and her like want to like go to this boy band concert, and just seeing her struggle with like like fighting against her mom and her like need to like please and to honor her family, and yeah, and that really makes you care about her.
Oh yeah. What is it like as a filmmaker, especially working in animation, when you spend all this time on story, you start to figure it out, and then for the first time you get to see it kind of come alive? Because if you're shooting a live action film, you call action, and they do the first take. Okay, that didn't look at all what I thought. Okay, we're gonna figure it out, or it's exactly what I thought. When animation, there's this sort of like birthing process where it slowly becomes what you think. Like, do you have a moment where you go, "Oh, that's the picture in my head"?
Oh, yeah, but it's like you said, it takes a while to get there,
Yeah.
and you're kind of working with a rough, janky version of the movie for a really long time.
Yeah.
Um, and that was like one thing that I had to kind of like train myself to get used to, like
Yeah.
seeing like the first pass of something
Like,
in
why does my movie
in
look art?
animation. Yeah, yeah, and like it's like, oh, it's like really rough, but
Yeah.
like through each pass it's going to get better and better and better. And I think yeah, I think it for me like a scene really clicks and comes alive when I see it in edit, when I
Yeah.
see the animation cut in with with the sound effects, the voice, the music, and the scene all plays, and it's making me feel what we want it to
Yeah.
feel. Like edit is where it all kind of comes alive, I
Yeah.
think.
You can see they can show you, okay, this is what your character looks like, and okay, we're there,
Yeah.
but the expressions might not be there yet. So even if you're there, there's the voiceover at the same time. You're like, well, it's just someone they're reading it well, but I don't see it on the face yet. We're not. That's I imagine when you finally see that, then you go, okay, now we've got what we need. We're figuring out now where the movie is, because until then, like
Yeah.
I said, it's probably not. It doesn't feel like a movie yet, almost.
Yeah, it's not yeah, I feel like for other department reviews, you're kind of just looking at like a very like small like piece of the larger
Yeah.
picture,
We
and
get the
you're like
eyes, whatever.
analyzing it, but then edit is really where it all kind like all of the pieces are assembled and it feels like a movie. Because like you could be an animation and you could feel like, oh man, like this scene is working really well, like the acting, facial expressions, all that works, but you're not like seeing it with music. You're not seeing the scenes around it. You're not seeing how it fits into the bigger picture. So it's still, you have no idea if it works or not. And when you bring it into edit and you're seeing the whole thing, that's when you're like, oh, this fits, or like this beautifully animated shot actually doesn't work
No.
where we put it here. Like we actually have to cut it. So
Oh yeah. Animated editing, I imagine, is a really unique skill just because you don't necessarily know until you get there. With live action, I imagine sometimes you're like, I kind of feel the vibe of the film. We're not going to need this thing. We'll do it, but we're probably going to get rid of it. Or pacing wise, we're not there. The movie, an animated film, can almost be anything when it enters editing. It's almost like you're carrying this sack of good stuff, and you're like, okay, we got to put it on the table and make something out of this.
yeah, I mean, it's very like compared to live action, like it's way more planned out and methodical because you don't want to get to the point where you're cutting out fully animated scenes because that's
Yeah,
just wasteful and expensive. So we shoot all of our like we I guess we shoot our coverage
right.
and we try out a lot of stuff in the storyboarding phase. So that's where artists are like coming in and they're like drawing idea, like they're like drawing like a rough version of the script, and that's where you're like working and tinkering with the like in edit with the timing of everything, with the gags, and you're
Yeah.
like cutting scenes out and you're like shortening them and you're working in the storyboard form, and
Mm.
that's when like and when that feels good, then you move on to like camera and then animation and all that stuff. But all of that stuff, all that messy kind of like jumbly like scrapbooking and putting all that stuff together, like that's more in the storyboarding and edit phase.
Right. Well, I mean, when it works, it works, and especially with this one, you can tell that it works. And I think with animation, as we sort of wrap up, it's you can really appreciate when something is as good as it is because you know how much went into it, even more so than I think live action, because you see the actors, you know there were sets, but the idea of, well, there's this team that has to create this literally out of nothing.
Yes.
It
Yes.
I imagine for you guys as much as anything else, when it really hits and people are excited about it and it does well, there's this you get to take a quick moment and go, we did it.
Yeah.
Not that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like at the wrap party, it was definitely that because, that was the first time we had all watched the movie collectively together. That this was like, tail end of COVID. We all gathered in an outdoor theater and we watched it, and everyone's work just like, was combined, and like it was making a movie that was making us feel things, and we were all just like so ecstatic that it worked. Somehow it all worked.
Well, I'm so glad that it did, and I'm so glad you're able to do this, and I hope that this continues for a long time. There's something very special about what Pixar is doing, especially lately, with very, I think, filmmaker forward voices, and I like it. I want more of it. So
Me
much
too.
to the source. Please do more.
Yes, we'll try.
Um,